LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 16th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. As you can see, my surroundings are a little different. I'm not broadcasting from home, so if something goes wrong with the live stream, I am recording the show. I did press the record button, didn't I? Yes, I did press the record button so I can upload the recorded show as a uploaded video if the live stream somehow breaks down, but so far so good. This week I have the 14 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. The Sunday morning news analysis shows, of course. It should be really educational, informative, media criticism and political comedy show for you all tonight. There's a link down in the video description to my clip list if you want to follow along on the notes. I don't have a printer. I put it on my phone so I can follow along on my clip list. My two topics are Vice President Kamala Harris, where I will discuss, if you've been watching my live stream for the primaries, I've been doing this over 7 years, but I followed the whole Democratic primaries, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, neither of them were my favorite candidates, but I, even as a former public defender and a ACLU activist, expressed some concerns about Kamala Harris as a former, prosecutor and attorney general, a cop kind of, and definitely being pro-cop in some of her stances that I had some problems with that, so I will be discussing that, and also this weird idea that Kamala Harris isn't eligible to be president of the United States, even though she was born in Oakland, California. That's kind of ridiculous. And then I will have some clips at the end, Trump going postal, which has to do both with Trump messing up the post office as a last-ditch effort to stop his big loss that seems to be coming in the election, although that's certainly not for sure. And there'll be some stuff about the pandemic. Jared Kushner getting cross-examined about the pandemic by Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation. But before I get to that, the political comedy clip I want to show you goes all the way back to Monday. This was one of Trump's press conferences, and I might have passed this by, but as a history major, I am always upset when Trump gets history wrong, and he's always talking about the 1917 pandemic that happened in 1918, and for like months now I've been screaming at the TV 1918, and it's one of the reasons that I think their whole attack on Joe Biden, that he's not so sharp and he makes these gaffes. Well, look at this Trump gaffe here, which not only has the 1917 versus 1918 error, but goes way beyond that, as I will discuss with you after we watch that political comedy clip from the White House press conference on Monday over here.
If 160,000 people had died on President Obama's watch, do you think you would have called for his resignation?
No, I wouldn't have done that. I think it's been amazing what we've been able to do. If we didn't close up our country, we would have had 1.5 or 2 million people already dead. We've called it right. Now we don't have to close it. We understand the disease. Nobody understood it because nobody's ever seen anything like this. The closest thing is in 1917, they say, right? The great pandemic certainly was a terrible thing where they lost anywhere from 50 to 100 million people. Probably ended the Second World War. All the soldiers were sick.
I don't think the 1917 pandemic that happened in 1918 ended the Second World War that ended in 1945. Oh, actually, it did have some effect on the First World War. I know what he was trying to say. It's not so bad if you understand the mistake he was making, whatever. But the reason I play it especially is because it is pretty bad that he keeps saying 1917. For months and months of this pandemic, he can't get the year of the previous pandemic right. And then, of course, he makes a gaffe just like Biden makes. We all make mistakes, and I guess as people get older, as people get in their 70s, they make more mistakes. So that's why I wanted to show that clip. And then, I usually, at this point, after I show the political comedy clip, I go to the news summaries. And I do have 5 news summaries I'm going to show you as clips number 3 through 7. But clip number 2 here, this is out of order. This is actually from Wednesday, the Rachel Maddow show. And this is a clip that has to do with my main topic, Vice President Kamala Harris. As I was saying before I showed the political comedy clip, I had a lot of problems with Kamala Harris as a former prosecutor, former attorney general, being pro-cop, because I'm a former public defender. And I don't know much about her record as a district attorney in San Francisco. I do remember as an ACLU activist working for police transparency and accountability bills that she opposed. And so that's one of the reasons that I had the problems I did during the primaries. I noticed in the comment section, actually, I already have a couple super chat contributions from Sexy Bob, who I thank Sexy Bob for that contribution before I started the show, for extra Wi-Fi, because here I am off taking my daughter to college in a strange place with bad Wi-Fi. But then Matthew asks, have you ever met Maya Harris? Thoughts on having ACLU lawyer and prosecutor in the same family? Have a great show. Thanks for all you do. I don't think Maya Harris is a lawyer, but I have met Maya Harris. In fact, that's what I was about to talk about, is I spent time serving on the ACLU of Northern California board starting in May of 2007, as when I first joined the board of the ACLU of Northern California, the largest affiliate of the national ACLU. And the executive director at that time was Maya Harris, the sister of Kamala Harris, and a great civil libertarian. And I always keep that in mind when I think of Kamala Harris. Although Maya Harris was just there briefly, and then we had like a transitional executive director, and then for over 10 years we've had Abdi Sultani, a great executive director at the ACLU of Northern California. And I served on the board all the way from 2007 until the end of 2019. And one of the people I served with on the board was a San Francisco public defender named Niki Solis. And, she's not like a great friend of mine, but I did get to know Niki Solis a little bit. We even co-chaired a committee together, the Chapter Implementation Committee. And I know she is like the real deal. She's not a sellout. She's a career public defender who really fights for the things that I think are important. And here is Niki Solis talking to Rachel Maddow, saying that Kamala Harris has gotten a little bit of a raw deal. Although if you listen to her carefully, she does emphasize she was on a different side from Kamala Harris. They didn't agree on a lot of things, and there are a few little caveats in there, but just that everything said about Kamala Harris in the primaries wasn't exactly true, especially when it comes to her being a district attorney, the district attorney in San Francisco. And I will talk about that clip a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Really interesting op-ed that was written by a longtime public defender in San Francisco named Niki Solis. Niki Solis says this, quote, "There's been much talk about the time Senator Kamala Harris spent as a prosecutor. As a public defender for 24 years, I examined, critiqued, and battled Harris when she was the San Francisco district attorney. And more often than not, Harris and I were on opposite sides. Having had this experience, I feel compelled to speak on Harris's record while she was a district attorney. Quote, simply put, Kamala Harris was the most progressive prosecutor in the state. This is not an anecdotal opinion. It is based on facts." Joining us now is Niki Solis, the author of that op-ed. She's been a public defender for over 2 decades. She was a manager in the public defender's office in San Francisco when Kamala Harris was district attorney there. Ms. Solis, first of all, thanks for your service as a longtime public defender, that critical and critically important work. And thanks for taking time to help us understand your take on this tonight.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
One of the things that struck me about your op-ed is your sort of confession that you grappled with whether to say this. You said, I grappled with this idea of defending a former prosecutor for a long time, but Harris is more than that. I have to acknowledge the truth and say what I feel is right to set the record straight. Tell me about that, grappling with that, and why that was a difficult decision for you.
Well, we were adversaries, and Joe Biden said something during that debate, and he said he was a public defender. And at that moment, I didn't know that fact. And I thought, you know, so much is being said about Senator Harris that doesn't tell the complete story. There were so many progressive policies that she implemented, behavioral health court, which is a mental health treatment court that became a national model. And our office pushed for that. There were other programs, Back on Track and other things that I didn't include in the op-ed. But I know, and a lot of people in our office knew of the progressive changes that she was implementing. The problem was that there was criticism, but there wasn't this balance. So I felt like I had to fill the void because I didn't feel like it was a fair representation of Senator Harris's record when she was district attorney in San Francisco. And I battled with it because I honestly felt that, you know, as a public defender, people may not understand or might think that somehow, you know, we were on the same side. We weren't. We were opposed ideologically in many ways. But I had to speak out and give credit where credit was due because there was a lot being said that weren't true, simply put.
So, like I said, Niki Solis, a 20-year public defender in San Francisco, is the real deal, not a sellout. I believe that, I mean, if you listen to her carefully and everything she said in that Rachel Maddow interview, she did still, you know, say Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. I disagreed with her on a lot of things, but she was mischaracterized. It was some of the things that, as you might expect in a political primary that came out, were not exactly accurate. They were spun too far to the negative. Some of the things Kamala Harris said about Joe Biden, you know, in terms of, you know, that little girl was me, that whole thing. And anyway, all of that will be covered in the news summaries that I want to get to now. And I will talk more about Kamala Harris when I get to some of the newsmaker clips about that, especially about whether she's eligible to be president. And I will commit a little bit of legal analysis using my ACLU Constitution here. As to whether someone born in Oakland is eligible to be president of the United States. And that's one of the things that's covered in what is... Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention before I get to the news summaries. The reason I have such problems with prosecutors, former prosecutors as politicians, because I'm a former public defender, is because of what I learned about our racist policing and our racist criminal justice system. And if you've been watching my show since the beginning, you know the one book that I've always had behind me on the bookshelf is The New Jim Crow. See, I brought this. Actually isn't the same copy I have on my bookshelf. I have a hard copy, a hardback copy on my bookshelf. This is a extra special copy here that for supporting this movie on a GoFundMe page. This is a copy that is, where is it? Actually autographed. Where's the? By Michelle Alexander. Where's her? No, it's yours. Oh, wait. See? Michelle Alexander, 2/29/16. This is my autograph copy of The New Jim Crow. And if you read this book, which has been behind me, can I get this to? Which has been behind me on my bookshelf for the whole 7+ years I've been doing my Sunday live clip roundup. If you read that book, you will understand how we have this racist system of mass incarceration. And even as a public defender, sometimes I felt like To make a Holocaust analogy, like a capo in the concentration camp, you know, the capos were the Jews who like helped out the Nazis and to process everybody. And if the public defenders are sometimes feel like the capos, like the prosecutors, they're like the Nazis in the mass incarceration system. So if you're going to be in the mass incarceration system, you better show that you were fighting the evil, the huge evil in the system. And that's where I start with. But then you just heard what Niki Solis said about what Kamala Harris did as a more progressive prosecutor. And anyway, I wanted to put it, since I brought the new Jim Crow all the way up to one of the northernmost counties of California here, where I am doing my show this week. I thought I would point that out to you and explain why the new Jim Crow and mass incarceration is such an important part of my political identity. And having said that, I will now show you the best, longest news summary as usual for this week. NBC News' Meet the Press. Chuck Todd gives his introduction and then goes to the package, covers how the Democratic convention is about to start, and that's one of the main themes you'll see is this year everything's different because of coronavirus, but then most of them don't even really talk about coronavirus, don't talk about the number of cases and deaths, and anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more with you after we watch this 4.5-minute news summary from NBC News' Meet the Press this morning over here.
Good Sunday morning. Normally, on the Sunday before a national political convention, we'd be inside a sports arena right now, anticipating cheering crowds, boisterous protests, and even anticipating colorful balloon drops. But not this year. Not before this week's unconventional Democratic convention, nominally in Milwaukee, or next week's Republican gathering somewhere in America. This year's conventions, like everything else, have been upended by COVID-19. One thing that has not changed here, though, is the pre-convention naming of a running mate, with Joe Biden picking the odds-on favorite for the role, Senator Kamala Harris of California. Biden and Harris will try to do something that has not been accomplished since 1992, defeat a sitting president. And they begin with a bit of a head start. Our brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, half of which was taken after the Harris news, shows Joe Biden with a 9-point lead over President Trump among registered voters, 50-41. While that's down a bit from Biden's 11-point lead last month, overall, the numbers look pretty stable when you look at this race over the entire summer. But interestingly, among Biden voters, only 36% say their vote is more for Biden, while nearly 60% say they're voting primarily against Mr. Trump. Overall, interest in this election is extraordinarily high. 79% of all voters right now in August, 83% of Democrats, 85% of Republicans, but all of these voters right now in August say they're highly interested in this election. Folks, those are October numbers normally. The bottom line from our Republican and Democratic pollsters is this. While President Trump needs to pull another inside straight to win, this election is not yet a done deal for Biden. And all this past week, the president made it clear that he's willing to hobble the Postal Service and imperil mail-in voting, which of course he fears will help the Democrats in November.
Universal mail-in voting is going to be catastrophic. It's going to make our country a laughingstock all over the world.
The Postal Service Inspector General is examining changes made by Trump appointee and donor Louis DeJoy after an urgent warning to dozens of states that it cannot guarantee all mail-in ballots will be counted. In an internal memo on Thursday, DeJoy acknowledged unintended consequences to service, arguing cuts were necessary because our financial condition is dire.
Is he trying to discourage mail-in voting? Are you trying to discourage?
No, not at all. The steps that he's taken are trying to stop the tremendous losses that have taken place for many, many years. He's trying to streamline the post office and make it great again.
Mr. Trump has repeatedly claimed, without evidence, that mail ballots lead to widespread voter fraud, although he and Melania have requested mail-in ballots in Florida.
I've heard some people say they think that the reason the president doesn't want people to vote by mail is that polls show that people who want to vote by mail tend to vote for President or Vice President Biden. So this is a political calculation.
What we've never seen before is a president say, I'm going to try to actively kneecap the Postal Service. to encourage voting, and I will be explicit about the reason I'm doing it.
Meanwhile, President Trump is struggling to respond to the Biden-Harris ticket, who are hammering his handling of the virus, which 58% of all voters disapprove of.
So let's institute a mask mandate nationwide, starting immediately, and we will save lives.
Other countries are following the science. Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News.
And Mr. Trump and his campaign are struggling to define Harris. The Republican National Committee argued liberals revolt against Biden-Harris ticket.
She's going to have to hide her time as a prosecutor from the anti-police left.
Before saying her pick shows radical extremists have seized control of the Democratic Party.
She's radical left. Now she tries to pretend she's not, but she's the most liberal person in the U.S. Senate.
The president called Harris nasty, a mad woman, and he is renewing the racist birther conspiracy theory he pushed for years about President Obama.
I heard it today that she doesn't meet the requirements. And by the way, the lawyer that wrote that piece is a very highly qualified, very talented lawyer. I have no idea if that's right. He wrote an article saying there could be a problem. It's not something that I'm going to be pursuing.
Harris was born in Oakland, California. And joining me now is the independent senator from Vermont.
Oh, and I will have a couple Bernie Sanders clips. The independent senator from Vermont, including, I believe there's one from Meet the Press, right? Yeah, clip number 9 is Bernie Sanders on Meet the Press. But you saw there, I think, a good coverage of all the news stories, although why nothing about the 5.3 million COVID-19 cases? Why nothing about the 169,000? I think last week you saw Meet the Press talking about how we can't get numb. We have to, and they compared the number of COVID-19 deaths to various wars, and then this week they not really going to report those deaths. That would be my one criticism of the Chuck Todd summary there, but it did cover pretty much everything. ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos had a much shorter news summary. Like I said, I have to look at my phone because I don't have a printer to see my notes here. But this is clip number 4. Like I said, most of the news summaries are talking about how COVID-19 has... The main thing they say about COVID-19 is the Democratic convention's coming up and nobody's home or nobody's showing up. It's all different than it was 4 years ago, which is what George Stephanopoulos talks about at the beginning of this ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which is pretty short, and I will talk about with you after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. 4 years ago, on the eve of the Democratic convention, we were in Philadelphia as the delegates gathered, all set to broadcast from the convention hall as all networks have done since the dawn of the TV era. Not this year. The pandemic that has upended so much of our lives has essentially canceled the convention. The delegates will not be gathering in Milwaukee. The speakers will be taking a virtual stage, beaming in from all over the country in an epic display of social distancing. One thing that will not change from 4 years ago, the kickoff speaker in prime time will be the runner-up for the Democratic nomination, Senator Bernie Sanders. He joins us now from his home in Burlington, Vermont. Senator, thank you for joining us this morning.
And like I said, I do have a couple Bernie Sanders clips coming up, and I'm looking at my CNN State of the Union news summary, which is also fairly short, only a minute and 15 seconds, but this is the clip, other than CBS News' Face the Nation, which does a whole COVID-19 news analysis. That's their main focus in the next news clip. Here you'll see CNN State of the Union telling you 5.3 million cases, telling you 169,000 dead, and most of what you need to know about the news summary if you want to do it in just a little over a minute, which I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Dick Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is fearful. There have now been more than 5.3 million coronavirus cases in the U.S. and more than 169,000 deaths in the U.S. The CDC is now warning it could be the worst fall from a public health perspective that we've ever had, unquote. Tomorrow marks the beginning of the Democratic National Convention, and with fewer than 90 days until the presidential election, the president is now stoking an urgent crisis over voting by mail, spreading uncertainty and misinformation about mail-in voting as states scramble to figure out ways for Americans to safely exercise their democratic right in November. This, as the U.S. Postal Service is warning states that they may not be able to deliver ballots in time to be counted based on current election rules. A big part of the slowdown? Controversial changes enacted by the Postmaster General, which are now under review by the Postal Service internal watchdog. In an interview earlier in the week, President Trump linked the two issues, saying he opposes Democratic requests to fund the post office because of the push in several states for universal mail-in voting. According to sources, Democrats are now seriously considering whether to bring the House back from recess as soon as next week to address this crisis. Let's go straight to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows.
And I am going to show you a great cross-examination of Mark Meadows by Jake Tapper, where Mark Meadows actually refers to Jake Tapper's producer in his ear. I guess he's got like a little thing in his ear. This is what I use to listen to the clips while you're watching them, but I can't put it in my ear because, like just happened now, if I were to leave this in my ear the whole time, I would hear my own voice in my ear, which totally it's like my own voice like 2 or 3 seconds later. If you're wondering why at the end of the clips I always take this out, well, anyway, when I get to that clip, that's clip number 11, you'll see Jake Tapper cross-examining Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, about how the post office is removing sorting machines from various locations, and Mark Meadows says, well, why don't you ask the producer talking in your ear for some fact-checking, because that's not true. And then you'll see Jake Tapper comes back with that, but you'll have to wait to clip 11 until we get to that. The next news summary, I don't know, this might actually be the best news summary if you think the most important thing is that people are dying from COVID-19, which probably is the biggest news story. And one of the things I've been saying about Face the Nation for a while is if you've been watching my Sunday Live Clip Roundup all the way back through January, February, March, when COVID-19 started to appear and become a big story, there were a couple weeks where I didn't cover it, but I mentioned that CBS News' Face the Nation was covering it, and they were either exaggerating the dangerousness of COVID-19, the coronavirus in their reporting, or they were the only corporate news outlet that was covering the most important story. And guess what? It turns out CBS News' Face the Nation, they were the one outlet that was covering the most important story, coronavirus, COVID-19. And I will talk about that a little more with you after we watch the CBS News Face the Nation news summary that focused on COVID-19 and opening up schools, opening up colleges, and I will talk about why I'm here taking my daughter to a college that is partially open after we watch that. Well, this is really the last news summary, since the last one is Fox News Sunday, which is not really news, not really journalism, but Face the Nation has a little bit more of a right-wing spin sometimes, but is definitely journalism, and definitely this week, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch Margaret Brennan putting it to Mark Strassman, who's always in Atlanta, and Margaret Brennan mentioned several weeks ago, he's in Atlanta because every week they ask the CDC in Atlanta for an interview and they never get it, so he's like lost in Atlanta forever until he gets a CDC interview, Mark Strassman, I guess, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that CBS News Face the Nation news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Our new normal in the U.S. has become persistent coronavirus infections and deaths. Each day this week, there were over 50,000 new cases and more than 1,000 deaths. That's where we seem to be stuck as we head into what the CDC director said this week could be the worst fall we've ever had. We begin this morning with CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman in Decatur, Georgia.
As schools reopen, try taking America's temperature for COVID. Worry surges with the virus. One sick child can empty a classroom. Ask this Florida elementary school.
There's no playbook on this.
Not in Mississippi. Schools in 38 counties report COVID patients. Not in Georgia. Cherokee County already has quarantined 1,200 students and staff.
I hope people who can't wear a mask are staying home because, we have that option here. You don't have to come into school.
On college campuses, it's move-in day for the virus.
Everyone's kind of freaking out.
2 dorms and a fraternity at the University of North Carolina report COVID outbreaks. In 1 week, Notre Dame reported 44 positive cases.
It didn't seem terribly safe, so we're kind of sticking to ourselves for the time being and seeing how it plays out.
10 states have rising COVID cases, and COVID deaths are up in 9 states. Across America, 4 of the top 5 areas for COVID deaths are in South Texas, despite the state closing bars and mandating masks.
It is easy to get a sense of fatigue. It's easy to want to stop having to comply with those standards.
Florida's governor is strong-arming Hillsborough County, the Tampa area. Either reopen schools or he'll bankrupt the school system by withholding up to $200 million in state aid.
It would be really bad policy to deny those many other parents the opportunity to resume in-person instruction for their kids.
But criticisms about bad COVID policy have also dogged DeSantis. Florida remains a global epicenter for the virus. The state now nears 10,000 COVID deaths. Here in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp has adamantly opposed mandating masks. But after a leaked White House report criticized Georgia's COVID response, Kemp has backed off. His new executive order will allow cities and communities to require masks going forward. It's one more sign that 6 months into America's epidemic, there still really is no COVID playbook. Mark.
Oh, and did you see there? I guess I was wrong. Mark Strassman is no longer waiting for an interview with someone from the CDC in Atlanta. He's moved to Decatur, Georgia, which, I don't know, does that mean that he's still waiting for the interview, but he's just sort of like driving around the state as he gives up on ever getting it? I don't know about that, but one of the things that I think was... I don't know what that just was. Something dropped. But one of the things that was missing from that report was not a lot about testing. I said that I was going to talk a little bit about where I am now. I am bringing my daughter to college, a college that is partially reopening here in California. I talked about this a little bit at the end of the live stream last week. My daughter is a marine biology major, and she's in a year where she has a marine biology class with a marine biology lab, which, she's at a college which is near the ocean, that has a lab actually at the ocean. So she is one of the people who needs to come in person she has several classes, and only one of them is in person, and it's that class, the marine biology lab. So they've opened up the campus for like a quarter of the students. Every dorm room is now a single dorm room, and when they arrive, they are quarantining for 14 days. They're testing, and then they're doing periodic retesting, and those are the kind of things that I think makes it a little bit more safe. And I don't think that Mark Strassman covered enough of those details when he talked about colleges reopening. So that's my criticism of that CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which otherwise I think was spot on in concentrating on what's probably the biggest story, which is the ongoing cases and deaths from the coronavirus. And even though there were later parts of the program where they did cover the Democratic Convention, and at the end, Margaret Brennan did this long video essay on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and the right to vote, and for women, and how that was a big struggle, and then also how women of color, black women, were important in that struggle, and then got screwed out of the right to vote from 1920 to like 1965 or whatever, and did talk about Kamala Harris in that context. So, even though none of that showed up in the news summary, it did show up later in the Face of the Nation program. And at a link down in the video description, you can see the entire Face of the Nation program on YouTube. They cut it up into parts, but anyway, that is the penultimate news summary. But the last news summary isn't really news. It's Fox News, which isn't really journalism, although sometimes, incidentally, journalism does occur on that channel. But this is Chris Wallace kind of sticking to the theme that things are different this year because of coronavirus at the Democratic Convention. And then the main news summary is given by Peter Doocy, the son of Steve Doocy, one of the hosts of Fox and Friends, one of the most right-wing ideologues on Fox News, not a journalist at all. And Peter Doocy is kind of like Steve. I mean, it's almost like he's the replacement who is growing to, because Steve Doocy seems to be getting older and older. If you watch Fox and Friends, he isn't even there a lot of the time, and though in the last couple of weeks he was there. And I think Peter Doocy is like they grew him in some, well, no, I'm not going to say that. He's his son, and I don't want to talk about somebody's family, but Peter Doocy does do his job as a Republican Party propagandist, which is what Fox News is. It's the propaganda arm of the Republican Party, even though journalism does incidentally occur on that channel on occasion. But I will talk about all of that a little. Oh, one thing I wanted to say before, since I want to totally pre-criticize the clip before you even watch it, I want to show you how, or say that Peter Doocy introduces Kamala Harris with a clip from her press conference with Joe Biden, where she says the case against Donald Trump is open and shut. And then he says, of course, that's what she said about Joe Biden. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the bias in Peter Doocy's report that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, the coronavirus has changed everything this year, including the nominating conventions for president. Normally, we'd be reporting from the Fox anchor booth in Milwaukee. But tomorrow, Democrats will kick off an almost all-virtual event. And Senator Kamala Harris will officially become the first woman of color on a major party ticket. In a moment, we'll speak with convention co-chair, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. But first, let's bring in Peter Doocy near the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware, where Joe Biden and Harris will deliver their acceptance speeches. Peter.
Chris, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been away from cameras this weekend. They have not stood side by side to answer questions since announcing they're the ticket, but they are practicing lines like this one ahead of this week's convention that will feature 17 rising stars.
As somebody who has presented my fair share of arguments in court, the case against Donald Trump and Mike Pence is open and shut.
That's a line similar to what Harris used when she was competing against Biden in the primaries, and it landed her on the ticket where she'll speak as the vice presidential nominee the night before Joe Biden.
Is anyone surprised Donald Trump has a problem with a strong woman or strong women across the board?
For this year's convention, don't think balloon drop, think Zoom backdrop. Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Bill Clinton will all address delegates virtually. So will Barack Obama, who is already previewing an attack about President Trump's willingness to hold up Postal Service funding to discourage voting by mail.
What we've never seen before is a president say, I'm going to try to actively kneecap the Postal Service to encourage voting.
Last night, the president said more mailed ballots could mean a delay declaring a winner.
You're not going to know this, possibly, if you really did it right, for months or for years, because these ballots are all going to be lost.
Congress controls the power of the purse, and they're right in the middle of August recess. But the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is reportedly ready to call everyone back to figure out how to fund the Postal Service. Chris?
Peter Doocy reporting from Wilmington, Delaware. Peter, thank you. And joining us now, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, co-chair.
And I will have a clip of the interview with New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy in just a minute, but I don't know, that Peter Doocy report from Fox News Sunday, was that journalism or Republican propaganda? YouTube, you decide. That's what I used to do at the end of all my videos. I don't do that on the end of the live stream. What do you think? Should I add an YouTube, you decide to the end of the live streams? Probably not worth it. But anyway, that's the end of the news summaries. Well, 4 news summaries and then the Fox News propaganda, Republican propaganda summary, I guess. But the next clip is New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, and this is the first of my newsmaker clips on the Kamala Harris topic, because I was talking earlier about whether Kamala Harris is too pro-law enforcement, too right-wing, too moderate for progressives to support. Well, as you saw in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, and I forgot to mention earlier, one of the weird things about the Trump attacks on Kamala Harris is that they are attacking her both on being, like I said, too pro-cop and right-wing, and the progressives shouldn't support her. But they're also attacking her for being too left-wing, the most liberal senator in the Senate, based on this GovTrack report in 2019. And by the way, I will tell you, before you watch this newsmaker interview by Chris Wallace, he does, even though he is one of the Fox News anchors who often commits journalism on Fox News, he does carry that water about, it's the schizophrenic attack from Trump is that she's too right-wing and too left-wing, but Fox News knows what they want to say, which is that Kamala Harris is too left-wing, and they use this GovTrack analysis of senators that says she's the most left-wing senator. That's when she was running for president in 2019 and was trying to burnish her progressive credentials, of course. And also the GovTrack analysis is based on how many bills a senator supports that are bipartisan bills, which that's kind of a weird metric anyway. But anyway, I will talk about that a little more with you after you see Chris Wallace cross-examining Democratic Governor of New Jersey Phil Murphy on whether Kamala Harris is too left-wing over in this clip.
I strongly support that.
Let's turn to the other big news this week. Joe Biden's new running mate, Kamala Harris, and her voting record in the Senate. Harris was the first senator to co-sponsor Medicare for all before walking that back and including private insurance. She supports the Green New Deal. She wants to ban fracking. And last year, an independent group ranked her as the most liberal member of the U.S. Senate. Question, sir, is Kamala Harris too far to the left for swing voters?
Now, Chris, listen, I think she is a fantastic choice, both in her personal history, from an immigrant family, a woman of color, her professional experience as Attorney General, as a prosecutor, as a U.S. Senator, how she complements Vice President Biden. I think when you look at that ticket and you look at this party in this moment in time in our country, I don't think we could ask for a better running mate for Vice President Biden.
What do you think of the president's continuing refusal to dismiss?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. And then Chris Wallace actually asked Phil Murphy about the conspiracy theory that Kamala Harris is not qualified to be vice president because her parents were immigrants, and I'll get to that a little more later. But I don't know. What do you think? Is Kamala Harris too far to the left after I talked about whether she was too far to the right for all that time? It's one of the weird things that the weird Fox News lenses that, I mean, I spend a lot of time watching Fox News because it's important to understand how, you know, the 40% of people who are going to vote for Donald Trump, you know, how they're seeing the world, and whether it's going to be 38% or 45% or, I mean, it's an important alternative universe that you have to keep an eye on because there are a lot of votes there. And anyway, that's I think my final Fox News clip for tonight, thank God. But I do have multiple additional newsmakers. The next one is Bernie Sanders, clip number 9 here, where you'll see this is Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press asking if Bernie Sanders, as the, you know, progressive runner-up in the Democratic primary, and you saw how that was one of the things that which of the news summaries was that? One of the news summaries mentioned that's the one thing that's the same this year is that Bernie Sanders is the progressive runner-up who's going to speak at the convention. And you'll see here Chuck Todd asks him the question that I was talking about earlier, whether Kamala Harris, regardless of what you just saw on Fox News, since Biden picked her, and Biden is pretty old and he's basically kind of picking the future of the Democratic Party, or maybe picking the future of the Democratic Party, what does Bernie Sanders think as the progressive standard bearer about having this not left-wing, but this more centrist, more moderate person being cast as the future? And Bernie Sanders says basically what I think, which is we've got to defeat Donald Trump. You know, what I think as a progressive, we have to defeat Donald Trump. There are many, many reasons for that. And then the day after Donald Trump leaves office, then we start pushing the Biden-Harris administration as far as we can to the left, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that Bernie Sanders answer talking to Chuck Todd this morning over here.
Kamala Harris, the pick of her in many ways. This is also Joe Biden's vision of the future of the Democratic Party, perhaps a future president, perhaps a future nominee. Is she a future progressive leader of the Democratic Party in your mind?
Well, Chuck, all that I can say is that I think what almost all progressives understand, that in this moment, we have got to do everything we can to come together to defeat Donald Trump, who in my view is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country, and elect Joe Biden. But as I have said many, many times, the day after Biden is elected, we're going to be working with the grassroots in this country, with working people, with people of color, with young people, to stand up and fight for an agenda that works for working families, not just the 1%. And that most certainly includes Medicare for all. So we're going to rally the American people around an agenda, and I look forward to doing that the day after Biden is elected.
Very quickly, in the state of Wisconsin, Kanye West is trying to get on.
And then if you watch the whole Bernie Sanders Meet the Press interview, Chuck Todd asks Bernie Sanders about Kanye West being qualified on the ballot in Wisconsin, and Mickey Mouse possibly, or that Mickey Mouse and Bernie Sanders had signed the petition. And I almost used it for my political comedy clip where Bernie Sanders said, well, I can't vouch for Mickey Mouse, but I did not sign a petition to put Kanye West on the ballot in Wisconsin. And that's one of the weird, dishonest things that the Trump administration is involved in. And I'll talk about that more when I get to the Postal topic. Can you hear all the creaking in this chair I'm sitting in? I wish I had picked a less creaky chair. I hope it's not disturbing your enjoyment of my live stream. But anyway, I will have another Bernie Sanders clip coming up, clip number 12. But the next clip is the last clip in my Kamala Harris vice president topic. This is a Trump administration spokesman answering the charges that, or answering questions about whether Trump is really serious about Kamala Harris not being eligible to be vice president, even though she was born in Oakland. I mean, I can't remember, is it like 80 million? No, 18 million Americans would possibly not be, 18 million U.S. citizens would potentially not be U.S. citizens if you try to enforce this rule that you have immigrant parents and we have to like check to see if they were lawful or not, if they were permanent residents. But, you know, that's not what the 14th Amendment says. It says if you're born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, you are a citizen. And subject, you know, and that's what this whole controversy is about, is the subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, I was a public defender for several years in California with many undocumented immigrants who were charged with crimes here, and if they were not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, how the fuck were they charged with crimes here? That's what I want to know. I know that no matter what your immigration status, you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States if you can be charged with a crime here, which you can. So that is ridiculous. And anyway, here is a Trump campaign spokesman talking to George Stephanopoulos. And George Stephanopoulos shows the Trump clips where he tries to be a birther once again in 2020 after many years of being an Obama birther. And it's racist, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that final clip. Well, the Bernie Sanders clip that comes next is kind of transitional between the topics, but this is the final full clip on the topic of Kamala Harris that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Finally, before we go, the president was asked yesterday whether he thinks that Kamala Harris, for the second time, is eligible to run for president. Here's what he said.
Will you say now that Kamala Harris is eligible to run and be vice president or president based on being born in Oakland, California?
So I have nothing to do with that. I read something about it. The lawyer happens to be a brilliant lawyer, as you probably know. He wrote an article saying there could be a problem. It's not something that I'm going to be pursuing.
Hey, during the 2016 primaries, the president raised similar questions about Ted Cruz. You were working for Ted Cruz at the time. You responded to those allegations then forcefully. Even Lindsey Graham says now that Kamala is unequivocally an American citizen eligible to run. Why can't the president say clearly, unequivocally, she is eligible to run for president?
Well, he did. He said last night at his press conference that it's not something that the campaign is.
But that's not what he said.
He's spending any time into. No, I'm telling you exactly what he said. He said it's not something the campaign is pursuing, not something that we brought up. It's not something.
But he did not say she is eligible to run for president.
George, he made very clear it's not something that he has brought up. This is something the media keeps bringing up, whether to him in his press conferences or even in interview formats like this where it's being brought up. It is not something that anyone in our campaign is talking about. The president said that he doesn't. It's not something that pursuing, not something that we're interested in. And in our opinion, it is case closed, end of story. And the only folks who keep bringing it up are the media.
Well, it's good to hear you say it is case closed. In fact, your campaign, a lawyer on your campaign, did retweet the article that raised the questions about whether or not Kamala Harris was eligible.
She wasn't speaking for the campaign. I am.
Okay, Jason Miller, thanks very much.
So that was the Jason Miller defense of the latest racist. I mean, it shows how disorganized the Trump campaign is. They don't have a good attack on Joe Biden. They are attacking Kamala Harris, from the right and the left. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And this whole birther attack on someone born in Oakland, is that the way Trump's going to win the presidency? I don't think so. And apparently Jason Miller doesn't think so because he's kind of contradicting the, why is it that Trump himself was saying, I'm not going to pursue it? That's not the same as saying that someone born in Oakland, California is eligible as, it's because Trump doesn't believe in birthright citizenship. It's sort of a foundational constitutional American belief, and I think I talked earlier. I already don't want to hold the Constitution upside down like Trump held the Bible upside down. I already committed my legal analysis when I talked about what the meaning of subject to the jurisdiction thereof is. That was what the whole John Eastman article was. This, was it Claremont Institute, who wrote this article in Newsweek saying that because subject to the jurisdiction thereof is in the 14th Amendment as to what a citizen of the if you're born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, you are a citizen. And just because your parents are immigrants doesn't mean you can't be charged with a crime. So I think you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof, as I said before I showed the clip. Anyway, that's the last clip that's totally on the Kamala Harris topic. The next topic is Trump going postal, which includes both the way Trump is slowing down the postal system, also his poor performance on COVID-19, which that's the final news clip I'm going to show you. Well, the last two are Margaret Brennan cross-examining Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, and then Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and senior White House advisor, I think his title is. But before I get to those two clips, I've two previous newsmaker clips. The first one is... oh, wait. This is... I have these out of order. I guess I have the Mark Meadows clip before the... because that's right. Because Bernie Sanders is responding to what Mark Meadows says in this clip here. Bernie Sanders talks both about Trump going postal and Kamala Harris in the clip after next. But this next clip is Jake Tapper cross-examining the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on this, on Trump going postal, that he's slowing down the mail so that there won't be so many mail-in votes that vote him out of the White House. And one of the stories that's come up in the last week or so is that they're removing like 700 sorting machines from various post offices. These are machines that can sort like, what is it, like 35,000 pieces of mail per hour. And if you get rid of, what is 700 times 35,000, maybe I'll use my calculator while we watch this clip. But the interesting, I kind of mentioned that I talked about this clip at the beginning of the show because there's this weird thing that happens. Jake Tapper is cross-examining Mark Meadows on the removal of sorting machines, and Mark Meadows says, well, talk to that producer who's in your ear about fact-checking. And that's why I've edited together two clips that are like 5 or 6 minutes apart, because Jake Tapper goes on to a whole different topic about how the problems with the mail are hurting all sorts of people, Democrats and Republicans. And then like 5, 6, 7 minutes later, the producer talking in his ear finally does the fact-checking, and he comes back to Mark Meadows. And anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch that newsmaker clip from CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper talking to the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, over here.
Well, let me ask you a question. Would the president support a standalone bill to fund the post office, to fund the Postal Service? Because if there are these considerations, if there are these concerns about whether or not it's going to work, then it would seem that more funding would help, as opposed to taking sorting machines off a line so that it will be more difficult to do mailing.
Well, there's no sorting machines that are going offline between now and the election. That's something that my Democrat friends are trying to do to stoke fear out there. That's not happening. I can tell you that the sorting machines, listen, the volume of first-class mail that they have at the postal system right now, we haven't seen that volume since I was 17 years old. It's not a volume problem. What this is a political narrative by my Democrat colleagues. And so listen, we've got a lot of people that are hurting out there. And this voting issue is key. If the Democrats feel like this is a big issue, and I talked to some of the more moderate Democrats and a few progressives as well, if this is a big deal, let's put it with a stimulus check to go to Americans. Let's put it with enhanced unemployment extension. Let's put it with small business reform in terms of the PPP and extending that. Let's get that. Will the president sign that? Yes, he'll sign that. And I'm certain that whether it's 10 billion or 25 billion or something in between, we can do that.
Are you saying that sorting machines have not been taken offline and removed? Are you asserting that did not happen?
I'm saying that sorting machines between now and the election will not be taken offline. Listen, I had Postal under my committee.
The ones that have been taken offline in the last couple of months.
No, but listen, here's what I'm saying is, when you look at it, the normal process of doing all of this, Jake, I had the postal system under. I had the only bipartisan bill to actually deal with the $146 billion loss that the Postal Service has been will see over the next 10 years. And so when you're looking at this, these postal machines and the drawdown, that was a 2006 bill that has been implemented that I don't necessarily agree with, but that's not this Postmaster General that did that. That was the previous Postmaster General under Obama.
I get that. Why were these sorting machines taken offline? Why were they taken offline? And why have
Jake, you keep saying that, so get your producer, Jake, you keep saying that. Get your producer to share where exactly those sorting machines were taken offline. Let them whisper in your ear, because what I'm telling you is you're picking up on a narrative that's not based on facts. When you look at the way that we process mail, we closed down a number of centers back 5 years ago under the Obama administration, and some of those sorting machines come out.
I understand
the normal process of taking them out are really about regearing, because we're seeing an increase in parcels, a decrease in mail volume, and what I'm saying is a sorting machine to handle 100 million ballots, it's like a gnat on an elephant's back. It's not going to matter with 8.6 billion pieces of mail going through the Postal Service every year.
This is not just a Democratic issue, though. You know this. You must be hearing from senators representing these large red rural states that depend on mail. We are hearing reports about veterans whose medications are coming in late, about individuals who rely on the mail to get their businesses out, if they're especially so many people doing business by mail during the pandemic, people whose Social Security checks aren't coming in. These are complaints coming in to offices that are Democratic and Republican. In terms of the fact check that you asked me to look into, one of my great producers did, in terms of the machines, Chris Bentley, president of the National Postal Mail Handlers Union Local 297, which covers Kansas and part of Missouri, two good Trump states, told CNN that postal management has already taken out 4 machines in Kansas City, 2 machines in Springfield, Missouri, and 1 machine in Wichita, Kansas. That is earlier this year under this new Postmaster General.
No. With all due respect, and if we look at it, I can talk to Kansas, I can talk to Tucson, Arizona. You're talking to someone who knows is when we take out those processing, they're part of a processing center that comes in, and as we start to move those out, if they were not part of an already scheduled reallocation, it's not happening. It's not a new initiative by this Postmaster General. And when we look at this, it's all about efficiency, but you have a normal system of changing it out. And so with all due respect of your fact checker, I'll be glad to come in. We can spend an hour talking about this. We'll bore people to death, but I can tell you this, the post office has been losing money for over 10 years. You can go back, Google it, look at the fact that I've gone in with Megan Brennan and said, I want to fix it to make sure that we fix it. This president is serious about fixing it. Louis DeJoy is serious about fixing it. We'll have the money allocated, and as the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy said just the other day, if it's about processing ballots, he's willing to spend the overtime to make sure that it happens and make sure that we get ballots back as quickly as possible.
That's great news.
That may be great news, and you want to see the entire Jake Tapper interview of Mark Meadows. I edited together 2 parts there after Jake Tapper got the producer in his ear to fact check on where they were taking away the sorting machines. But one of the things that happened as breaking news after my Sunday live clip roundup is, or the morning news shows, is Nancy Pelosi is calling back the House of Representatives to vote on a postal bill. And they've also, if you follow me on Twitter, there's a link down in the video description to follow me on Twitter. You'll see I retweeted this tweet from a journalist earlier today saying that on August 24th, they're actually calling Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, to testify before the House a month early. So that is... It's not this coming week, but it's before the end of the Republican convention. It's like less than 2 weeks from now. The Postmaster General is going to be testifying before the House, and the House is going to come back to vote on a post office funding bill. And you saw there Jake Tapper, I think, doing a pretty good job on cross-examining Mark Meadows, the chief of staff to President Trump. But this next clip I'm going to show first references a clip that I didn't take of Mark Meadows, where Jake Tapper asked him, is Kamala Harris eligible to be vice president of the United States under the Constitution? And he said, sure. And then Jake Tapper mentioned how Trump won't say that, and then said, does sure mean yes? And he said yes. So I guess... everyone but Trump will be more definitive, just like Jason Miller said, I'm the spokesman for the campaign, and I say she is eligible. And anyway, that is the context you need to see Bernie Sanders answering the postal question, but also the Kamala Harris eligibility question. This is on CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper referencing the Mark Meadows interview, some of which you just watched. Is that a crow or a raven? All of a sudden I'm on a Game of Thrones episode? I don't know. But anyway, here's Bernie Sanders. Is that a portent of doom? A raven croaking in the background? Or is that a crow? I think it's a raven. Well, I have the door open and I'm in a forest in the northernmost part of Northern California. That's why there are birds calling, and I think it's a crow, not a raven. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section as we watch Bernie Sanders talking both about Kamala Harris's eligibility to be vice president and the I'll have to put that with the new Jim Crow. Oh, maybe it's a crow calling about the new Jim Crow. Maybe that's the new Jim Crow behind me. Well, okay, now I've made myself laugh. But here's Bernie Sanders talking about both Kamala Harris being eligible to be vice president and the way Trump is screwing up the postal system, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Sanders, thanks so much for joining us. You heard Mark Meadows answering my questions about the U.S. Postal Service and vote by mail. Did he say anything to you that reassures you that the election will be free and fair in the way you want it to be conducted?
Before we get to the post office, I'm glad that he thinks that Kamala Harris is eligible to run for president. And he dismisses it. He said, oh, sure, of course she is. Then why is the president of the United States engaging in a racist, xenophobic attack against her by suggesting she is not eligible? This is what this campaign is about. Jake, what we are fighting for here is not just the post office that I want to talk about. It's not just whether or not Trump will succeed in throwing 32 million Americans off the health care they have. It's not just whether workers will continue to get the $600 supplementary checks they desperately need when they're unemployment, or the $1,200 checks. It's not just climate change. It is, in fact, whether we're going to have a pathological liar staying in the White House who lies every single day. I mean, I think there have been documented, there have been some 20,000 lies as told that have been documented already. So when Meadows says, oh, yes, Kamala Harris, she's eligible to run for president, then maybe you got to talk to the White House and why they tweet out stuff that is terrible and lying. Terms of the post office. I don't have to tell you this because the President of the United States told you a few days ago. He wants to sabotage the Postal Service because he does not want many millions of people to be able to vote through mail-in ballots. That's not me. That is exactly what he said. And what he is trying to do in many, many ways is defund and destroy the United States Postal Service. Now, I happen to believe in the Postal Service, an issue I've been involved in for many, many years. But above and beyond the Postal Service, what is most important, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a progressive, whether you're a conservative, do you believe in American democracy? Do you believe that in the midst of a pandemic, when we have lost 170,000 people already, people have got to put their lives on the line to go into a voting station, or can they vote in through a mail-in ballot? I would just say this. Tuesday, here in my state of Vermont, we had the largest voter turnout for primaries that we've ever had. Most people voted by mail-in ballots. It was not a big deal. It worked very well. That is exactly what we have to do throughout this country if we're going to retain our democracy and the right of people to participate.
Do you think Speaker Pelosi...
So that was an awesome clip from Bernie Sanders, the second Bernie Sanders clip that I promised you earlier, where he talks both about the racist attack on Kamala Harris and also the attack on the post office, defunding the post office that apparently the Trump administration is engaging in. And despite what you heard from Mark Meadows about, oh, this is something that predates the Trump administration, you know, ask your fact checker. There aren't hundreds of sorting machines and all the overtime hours and whatever. It's Trump is doing everything he can to avoid the consequences of his poor COVID-19 leadership, and that is apparent. That's what this whole attack on mail-in voting is about, so that the people who are afraid to vote vote in person because they don't want to catch the COVID-19 virus, that those people aren't going to get to vote, and most of those mail-in votes are not Trump supporters. And this next clip, well, both of the next two clips are Margaret Brennan from CBS News' Face the Nation. She is on a tear this week in terms of her cross-examinations. You know, sometimes I say that CBS News Face the Nation is Fox News light because, you know, Fox News is not journalism. It's Republican propaganda. But CBS News' Face the Nation is journalism. But it's of the corporate news outlets, it's the one that has the most right-wing perspective, the most right-wing framing, and I say that all the time. But this week, Margaret Brennan, it's like she's been watching my live stream and she wants to contradict that analysis that I've made, which I don't think is true. But what I'm trying to say is she was on a tear, and she did some great cross-examinations of both Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, and then Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and senior White House advisor. And I'll start with Tate Reeves. The context for this is Margaret Brennan was talking about reopening schools and did this long cross-examination pointing out that Mississippi has over a 20% COVID-19 testing positive rate. And they've actually cut their number of tests. So, and what that means is they are testing less people. They're only testing people who are dying of COVID-19 or really sick. And, well, she says 23%. I heard maybe 21%. Later in the Face the Nation program, they had Scott Gottlieb on, and he said 21%. But whatever the number is, 21 or 23, the CDC says you're supposed to not reopen your schools somewhere between 5 and 10% positivity. And that's just the number of people who you're testing that come back positive. If it's over 5 or 10%, it means you are in real big trouble. And Mississippi is over 20%, but they're reopening their schools. And Margaret Brennan did this great cross-examination on that. And at the very end, one of the things Tate Reeves said, I almost used this as my political comedy clip. He said, because Margaret Brennan was saying, well, you know, your hospitalization rate and your ICU rate means that Mississippi hospitals are overwhelmed. And he's saying, and his response was, well, you know, even before COVID-19 in Mississippi, we had real problems with our ICUs and hospitals. It's like saying, well, you know, even before the pandemic, people were dying in the streets in Mississippi. So now that they're dying in the streets during the pandemic, that's no big deal. But anyway, I didn't take that clip. But at the very end, Tate Reeves says, well, most of the kids who have come back COVID-19 positive when we reopened the schools in Mississippi got their infections not from the schools but from someplace else. So really we need to clamp down on other types of transmission, not reopening the schools. And then you'll see at the beginning of this clip, Margaret Brennan says, well, maybe you should close down your bars. And Tate Reeves says, well, we've restricted access to bars. And Margaret Brennan says, yeah, you're closing them at 11 p.m. And my first reaction, I don't know, is this sexist? My first reaction was, meow. But anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch this penultimate clip. Margaret Brennan really laying into Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
You could shut down bars, for instance, to stop that community spread, as the White House has asked some states to do. I do want to move on, though, because
we have significantly limited bars in Mississippi.
Right. They close at 11 p.m. In Mississippi, you can request a ballot up to 1 day before an election, and your state was identified by the Postal Service as one where mail-in voting could be delayed. Are you confident that all mail-in ballots in the state of Mississippi will be counted in November?
I am confident that the ballots that are legally cast in the state of Mississippi will be counted, and I'm also very confident that Donald J. Trump is going to win Mississippi, and he's going to win it big. Every vote that is legally cast in the state of Mississippi will be counted in the November election, and I'm confident that once all of those votes are counted, that Donald J. Trump is going to win Mississippi and many other states overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I asked you what legally cast meant. But so your state doesn't currently allow for absentee ballots for fear of getting COVID. Like if someone doesn't feel safe going to a polling booth and wants to vote by mail, you don't allow for that right now. Why not?
We do not allow mail-in voting in the state of Mississippi. We think that that our elections process, which has been in place for many, many years, ensures that we have a fair process in which we have the opportunity to limit fraud. We still have fraudulent claims every single election. We've actually got many folks in our state that have had Democrats
Aren't you worried about the health of your constituents?
Because of election fraud, and it's just reality.
Well, first of all, that's not substantiated.
But every legal ballot cast is going to get counted.
You have a positivity rate of 23% in the state of Mississippi. Can you tell people that they can go to the voting booths and not get COVID? Why don't you offer the option for someone who's afraid of their health, someone with asthma, someone with diabetes, someone who's overweight, to send in their ballot by mail?
Well, we're not going to allow them to send in the ballot by mail unless they legally qualify for an absentee ballot, which is certainly allowable under Mississippi state statute.
What I'm asking is why not allow them to qualify based on those comorbidities or those concerns, the fear of getting COVID?
That is not what Mississippi state statute allows for. We're going to have an election. We're going to have a huge turnout in November. In fact, Margaret, I'll tell you, we've already had multiple elections in the last 3 months. We've had special elections throughout the state of Mississippi. We've had very good turnout in every single one of those elections. We've had fair elections, and we've had a winner, and we've had a loser, and we're going to do the same thing in November.
All right. No intention to change that. All right. Thank you, Governor.
So yeah, but and I pre-criticized that clip or talked about how I gave the context where Margaret Brennan had already heavily cross-examined Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, on reopening the schools when they have an over 20% positivity rate on their COVID-19 tests. And the number of tests in, I think I saw some statistic that the number of tests in Mississippi had dropped like over 20%, and their positivity rate is over 20% there. I would not send my kids to school in Mississippi. And then you saw Margaret Brennan after that, like, total pwn clip at the very beginning where she said, when Tate Reeves said, we're restricting access to bars. Yeah, you're closing them at 11. And then she went into that whole thing about how they won't let people get absentee ballots because they're afraid of getting COVID-19. And even though that, you're supposed to have a valid reason for an absentee ballot, and they won't open them up, even though there are so many people who should be afraid of getting COVID-19 in Mississippi. And one of the underlying conditions that makes you more susceptible to COVID-19 is obesity, which, I don't know, Tate Reeves, his collar seemed a little tight, and it seemed to be getting tighter and tighter as he was getting cross-examined, and I thought he might be getting, I was almost surprised he didn't do this during the end of that interview, because he was definitely getting pinned down by Margaret Brennan. So kudos to her for that great cross-examination. But the final clip I want to show is also from Margaret Brennan. She had an interview with Trump's son-in-law and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner, who was supposedly on to talk about the new Israel United Arab Emirates treaty that he negotiated, that's supposedly the first step to his Middle East peace treaty that he got put in charge of as like the most underqualified White House senior advisor in history, maybe, I don't know. But before Margaret Brennan got to that topic, she also talked to Jared Kushner about several other things, and I like how she pinned him down here on this topic of how the new White House medical advisor is this guy, Scott Atlas, who I think was recruited because he was a Fox News commentator. He is a doctor, but he's not an expert on pandemics, and he was engaging in a lot of happy talk over on Fox News before he got brought into the Trump administration. And he seems to be trying to get Trump to go for the Sweden model, where they protect the most vulnerable, but everybody else like goes about their business. It's like almost going for herd, as Trump says, or it's hard to understand what they're trying to do. And Margaret Brennan does a great job of bringing up the fact that like Tate Reeves, a lot of Americans are overweight or have asthma or diabetes, or they're old, or, well, you'll see that Margaret Brennan brings up the fact that 45% of Americans are vulnerable. They're in the vulnerable underlying condition population. And anyway, that's my final news clip for tonight. My one criticism, I want to totally pre-criticize this clip because I'm ready to be done with the show. Margaret Brennan had Jared Kushner on, didn't talk about that Atlantic article from a couple weeks ago where it said Jared Kushner was in charge of this whole shadow COVID-19 process in the White House, where he bought like millions of dollars worth of faulty tests, and they were going to like institute national testing until they realized, oh, it's only going to hurt people in the blue states, not the red states. And she didn't ask him about that. She didn't ask him about his quote where he said, you know, by July, we're going to be rockin'. Well, it's August. We're not rockin'. So didn't bring any of that stuff up, but still a good cross-examination for the final news clip tonight. Over here.
But I want to know, though, what is the actual conviction of the task force at this point? Is it to contain the spread of the virus, or is it to, as Dr. Atlas, the new advisor to the task force, says, really just isolate and protect vulnerable, high-risk individuals?
Well, look, we know a lot more than we did 5 months ago. When we did 15 days to slow the spread, it wasn't 15 days to get rid of the virus. It was a global pandemic. It was infecting all over the country. It was to slow the spread and make sure we had the resources we need. Now we have a lot more knowledge about who the virus impacts in which ways, and we've created a lot of ways to prevent it from spreading in certain places, and we've created a lot of ways to help people who do get it have a much more benign experience with it. So we're entering a much more strategic approach, which we're going to be taking until we do have a fully approved and safe vaccine that we can widely distribute, where we're trying to use all the resources we can to optimize for the best results possible. But again, even Dr. Fauci this week said that lockdowns are not the answer, and we need to find a way through this unprecedented time to use the resources we need in order to live as normal life as possible while taking the restrictions that will help us save as many people as possible and to keep our economy as healthy as possible, so that when this is over, we haven't destroyed our country in order to get through it.
Right, but what is the strategy in terms of, are you looking at containing? Because if you listen to Dr. Atlas, this new advisor, he has talked about really just protecting the vulnerable. But according to the CDC, 45% of adults, that's nearly half of Americans, have comorbidities. That's diabetes, that's asthma, that's just being overweight. A huge portion of the United States is vulnerable here. Do you think you have control of the virus?
Yeah, but if you look at the people who unfortunately have succumbed to the virus, most of them are over 70 and most of them have been in nursing homes. So we've been doubling and tripling down on getting the point-of-care tests to the nursing homes, getting the right PPE to the nursing homes. But Margaret, look, I came on today to talk about the historic breakthrough that the president achieved for peace in the Middle East. It's the first peace agreement in 26 years. And I will say that this has been a strategy we've been working on for the last 3.5 years.
Well,
and every step along the way, I face criticism
that,
for these actions. The president faced criticism for these actions.
Right.
And so the president takes a common sense approach. He's based on science, he's based on data, not based on conventional thinking. And again, I think that you're seeing the president continue to work with the governors and everyone to bring forward the best policies in order to get the best outcome possible with the virus.
So like I said, I thought that was a good cross-examination from Margaret Brennan. You saw how Jared Kushner was saying, I thought I was here to talk about what happened with the Mideast peace. Why do you keep asking me about all these things where I'm a total screw-up and the Trump administration has failed the American people and almost 170,000 people are now dead. And anyway, that didn't quite come up, but it kind of went in that direction. And like I said, down in the video description, the source of all my clips, especially CBS News' Face the Nation. If you click on the link down in the video description, you can see pretty much the entire show on their free YouTube channel. They split it up into clips. In fact, because I'm off away from home, I had problems capturing my clips this week. I used an Apple TV instead of a TiVo and whatever. You don't want to know about all my technical problems, but instead of even capturing the clips with either of those methods, I actually downloaded them from the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, where almost the entire program is available for free, just split up into knocked over my book one more time, but available for free on their CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel. Anyway, I pretty much criticized that clip before I showed it, and for those of you who have hung around till the end of the program. Unfortunately, because I'm off here in the northernmost, or one of the northernmost counties of Northern California, I do not have a Dash and Sandy clip, but if you're worried about Dash and Sandy, Dash the cat and Sandy the dog, well, Sandy and Dash are being taken care of by a pet sitter. Here is Sandy being walked by the pet sitter, and it seems like Sandy is smiling, but I've learned from long experience that expression on Sandy's face means Sandy is hot and panting, because back in Sacramento, where I live, it's like 111 degrees today. I'm lucky I'm up where it's just in the 70s. So, and I do have a Dash clip, not a clip, no video, but the pet sitter, I always show Dash and Sandy at Sandy's food bowls, and has anyone ever wondered, does Dash the cat have her own food bowl? Well, the pet sitter took a picture of Dash eating food at her own food bowl, so yes, there you go. Dash does have her own food at her own food bowl. But if you thought that just because I don't have a Dash and Sandy clip that I don't have a video of a local animal, no, you're wrong. If you follow me on Instagram, there's a link down in the video description to follow me on Instagram. I actually posted earlier today a clip that I titled Morning Fauna. This is like out here in the forest earlier this morning. This is not Dash, it's not Sandy, but it is a local morning fauna clip that I will end the show with tonight over here. That's because where I am, it's like right on the edge of the forest. You kind of saw some of that in the background earlier. It's after sunset. Everything is dark. It's time for me to go dark. I want to thank all the people who gave me super chat contributions along the way. I thank some of them, but then I saw Lulu Girl, Sinful Solutions, Goon Dom Zero Strike, and then a couple Zulu Girls, Peter Reed, Chairs, Bed. Is that how I can never pronounce those correctly. I hope I got all those right, but I appreciate the super chat contributions. There's also a link down in the video description to be a monthly Patreon contributor. Give me direct contributions on PayPal. There's also a join button down there to join as a YouTube member. That's the end of the program. I've gone way over time. It's been actually quite a difficult experience trying to create, produce, and broadcast the program for you away from home this week, but I've been doing it for 382 Sundays, over 7 years. I will be continuing to do it through the rest of the Trump administration, which will hopefully end in January 20th, 2021. Let's all hope that together as I end the show, and until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.